All righty. I decided to go back and revisit LangGraph. Got a couple projects I'm working on, and I found this brief tutorial. It was a little dated, and just as a learning exercise, I took this tutorial and upgraded it and expanded it quite a bit. Here's the link to this original tutorial. Um, you can see it here, and I will go ahead and post that in the notes. And here is the URL of my GitHub repo for what I did. Basically, and I'll go through this, there's just two examples. There's like a hello world, which is kind of like a modernized version of this, which basically just, when this guy wrote it, it worked fine. But the libraries have changed. LangGraph's been around for forever in the AI space. It's relatively new, but compared to for the AI space, it's been at least like a year and a half, maybe even 2 years at this point. So so I'll post the GitHub repo where you can check this out. And then I did a basic example based on what he did, just kind of updated it a little bit. And then I took that and actually made like a demo of something actually useful that you can do with this. Now, I wouldn't say that the second example is simple, but it is synchronous, meaning it's operating a pipeline where one thing happens and another thing happens and another thing happens. It does do some intelligent decisions, like it analyzes what question you ask and decides if it needs to go out to the web and pull more context or not. And to do that, I use either DuckDuckGo or Trafolitura, which is kind of like a poor man's Tavily, and combine the two. And if you have Tavily and you have a Tavily API key and you want to throw that in your environmental variables with a common name for the Tavily, I can't pronounce it, API name, then you just set this test mode to false. As default, it is true. I click something and where I went it disappeared. But anyway, so yeah, just set that, oh, here we go. False, and it'll use Tavity for the calls. And I did notice one bug earlier that I have to fix, and I apologize for it. It's not really a bug, but I think some of the labeling's off when I did the switch from if you're using Tavity or if you're using DuckDuckGo search and this library here, Trafolitura. Both of those are free, but don't abuse the DuckDuckGo search. If you start using it where you're doing 1,000 calls to it an hour or something, they will cut you off for at least the time. But for personal experimentation and stuff at home, it works great. So let's go back to the README here. So just this demonstrates basic LangGraph agents. Again, it's synchronous. I do have some web context that can be pulled, but it's not doing it through like an MCP server or like skills or anything like that. It just says, hey, do I need the LLM will decide if it needs to do a call or not, get more web content. And then if you have cavity or not, depending on that test mode variable that you set, and for now it's just hard coded, then it'll either use the freeware stuff or cavity. And just to give you an idea, the Hello World LangGraph example is about, and this uses two agents. It's got a outline agent that will take your prompt and it'll generate an outline, and then it'll have a writing agent, which will actually write an article based on that timeline. Um, and it's about 77 lines, and you could probably, if you really compacted that, shrink that down a little bit. Oh, it's pretty compact as is. But you've got your basic concepts here where you've got a workflow with LangGraph, you've got a state, you've got multiple agents, in this case, the minimum two, and you pass what the agents pull back into state, and they read from that state and share that state. And right now it just has this embedded prompt that you can go ahead and change. But this is kind of the hello world thing, which for me as a coder, I always find useful just to get the absolute basic concept and then go from there. So then I took this basic concept and built upon patterns that I'd used in business without using LangGraph, but using similar workflows with LLMs. And me and Claude Opus, I let Claude Opus do the grunt programming. I directed it how to do it, corrected things, iterated things, but it worked really, really well. Kind of scary how well it worked. And we've got this 13, basically about 1,400 lines of code here. A lot of this is pro code where it's doing a lot of error checking, retries, logging, and stuff like that. So this one has a lot more models going on, or a lot more agents going on. And you can kind of see that here. In LangGraph currently, they're called nodes. So we've got this extra content node, an outline node, a writer node, and an editor node. And what these edges do is you add edges which kind of determine how the models flow to each other. So you've got the start point, you go through here, there's a little bit of conditional logic here, and then you add the editor, and then it ends. There is an interactive mode on this, which is basically just if you run it from like a Windows or a Bash terminal, you can just call it and pass the Python or your prompt in as the first parameter. But if you run it here in virtual or Visual Studio, you can just run it in the terminal. So another thing to note is there are 3 directories with this. Ignore this old one, that's mine. You have your work in progress directory, which will, for each run of this that you do, probably generate about 5 or 6 files. It's good for logging because you can kind of go through and see what's going on. Like I ran this just recently on a huge chunk of content. It uh, pulled, it truncated it a little bit. So, but it was really big. But I would like to fix that. I've run this about 20 times and I hadn't seen that before. And then you have this output, and for the output, currently it saves 2 files for each run. It'll have your draft and then it'll have your final. So let's go ahead, I guess before we run it, go back to the README. Again, this assumes that you have an OpenAI key and that you put it in your environmental variables with the common naming convention for OpenAI keys. If you do that, then this will, using .NET and vet, or what is it? Load.environment. It'll go ahead and detect those, or .environment Python. Go ahead and detect those environmental variables and load it behind the scenes. If you gotta hack it, you can figure out how to do that, or you can set it manually in code. Another thing to be aware of is this, again, I talked about this test mode, or did I miss one? What test mode means is if it's set to true, again, it'll assume that you have a Tavily API. And what Tavily is it's kind of like a web scraping tool that's kind of optimized for LLMs. And it'll go ahead and pull data using Tavily from the web if it determines it needs more up-to-date information that's currently in the training set. If you set this to false, or I got that backwards. If you set it to true, I'm sorry, it is in test mode. It'll use DuckDuckGo search and the poor man's Tavily called Traffilatura. To be honest, I've been testing it and these were giving me better results than Tavily was, but there could be reasons for that. Like I might be limiting how much stuff I'm hitting Tavily, and I'm a little more generous on content stuff here. And then this other thing of note is the LLM model. Should probably be uppercase to make it consistent, but I'll let that slide for now. I'm just using GPT-5 Mini to keep the content down. You might get better uh, results. I'm pretty satisfied with the results so far using different models, or you go nano if you're really content conscious. Also, something to be aware of, I load on this advanced version, all my prompts are in this file or this directory here. and you can go in and tweak. Like for right now, the final version here is limited to 15 to 2,500 words. You could obviously up that. The way it does outlining, you give it better instructions here. And so there's that. Um, that's about it. Standard installation by pulling the repo, creating in a virtual environment. It's kind of on the shelf for UV. Everybody's like, oh, it's written in Rust, you got to use this. Like, so it saves me 2 seconds. Big whoop. But two things have sold me on UV now. I'm going to tangent here just a little bit. As you can set which Python version is used in your interpreter, which is pretty key because a lot of the LLM stuff is usually a couple versions of Python code behind. So that's a that's a bummer. So that was causing me problems because my main Python installation is way ahead of 3.11. But this one's generally safe for LLM use, so that's kind of what I use at least for now. Like probably safe with like 3.12, but anything over that, probably not. And it's not just a little bit faster, UV, even when it's wrapping pip commands, it's a lot faster. Like if you're creating a lot of projects or adding a lot of libraries, it's absolutely worth it. So I'm sold on UV now, or else I'll hold out for a little bit. So obviously you set your virtual environment and then you switch to it and activate it and you make sure it's running before you do any installation. So you install in your virtual environment and not your cache. If you're a Python developer, this is all boilerplate standard stuff. And then there's this requirements file here, and this has all the libraries that this needs to run. And yeah, it's a lot, but really it's only like about like that much. And then these are all sub libraries that get installed along with things. So you do that, you install it, and then you can run it by typing if you spell it right in the terminal, and you're good to go. So let's go ahead and give this bad boy a run. Now, one thing I did see is I think I've got some label issues going on, and I'll try to fix that. This is a run I did previously. I won't use the same prompt. Oh, that's another thing too in this whip. Should probably move this, but there's a user prompt history thing. So just, these are the jobs I've run, just kind of testing it out. It keeps track of the prompts I used. And one of the things I was going to do is just use that to switch models around, test which models are better, maybe add like ZAI and Claude and things like that for a future project. And then I could just have the prompts here and rerun them. But anyway, let's go ahead and give this thing a shot. So this is what can we talk about? Something on my mind. Give me might want to run it first. All right, so let's go here. Yeah, lower it a little bit so I can get to my so let's go on the actual thing. Here's the actual code. Feel free to look through it. I did use this job ID for the idea that eventually this code might migrate into something that's running it multiple times, and I needed specific jobs, which would be a combination of like date time and user ID probably. So that's what that's for. Otherwise, it's not really needed. And there's some of these, I probably would have been a little bit less prompt or less commentful. These are good comments, so I left them in. Not that I'm against comments, but I just, like agent name being a string, I probably can figure that out without putting that there. Nothing wrong with it, but makes your files longer than they need to be. So anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and run it rather than me babble. So it comes through, it says interactive mode. So let's go ahead and pick out a topic. We're all code heads, right? Let's Give me the most significant AI LLM advancements in the last 3 months. And this will go ahead when you say like last 3 months, it'll determine, hey, I need to pull some web content because this is beyond, you know, my training date. It doesn't really know what training date ending happened because the model switched. But if it's real-time info, it'll go ahead and hit the web. If not, it'll skip it. Any other? Let's just roll with that and see what we get. And it'll pass the current date. So the web searches will be affected by that. So it determines needs web search true, time sensitive true, complexity simple, and that determines it'll go ahead and if it's a simple thing, it might do less subqueries. Kind of we'll try to figure out how many subqueries it can do. It can do up to 10, and that's for web retrieval. So it's gonna do this. It tells you how many characters it's pulling back for each one, how it broke them down, tells you where it all saved it to. And again, these will be in this whip folder here. So if you want to look at them, you can. I'm going to stay out of it while it's executing. So it's using web content, query breakdown available for reference working. This is actually going out for each of those URLs that is scraped from DuckDuckGo and pulling a bunch of web context and then putting it all together. Outline length 4,500. And I do right now, I believe I have a limit on like the, oops. Yeah, right now the final output is about 15 to 2,500 words. But again, feel free to go through and fix all, or tweak all these prompts how you like. And again, this is operating synchronously, so it's one's got to complete before it moves to the next one for your more serious agentic workflows. And this one, it makes sense. You want that, but in other ones, if there's subtasks to do, like this one going out for each of the pieces, parts, queries probably could have happened asynchronously. So that'll be something I do in the next version of this. But anyway, it works decently as is, but I know every second counts. So, and then here's the editor. It made a final draft in there, and then it's gonna go. We should see this in the outputs. Oh, it's working on it. Put it in here. There's your draft. It's editing it, and editing goes through and just gives it another pass. You can add another guardrail. You put some guardrail agents at the very beginning and the very back, just to kind of make sure that the prompt the user wasn't going crazy. I wasn't too concerned about that because I'm using ChatGPT, and that's gonna guardrail on its own generally. But yeah, in a more professional context, you can have your guardrail agents front and center. Then we get a nice summation of what happened. I think my labeling is off. I don't think this one actually used cavity. Let's see what my setting is for that. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at the output here. I'm just curious real quick. I got this light right going in my face, so I can't see very well. Test mode true. Yeah, so I think my labels are just off, so I'll look at that. But it should have done DGS and Chapel which it did, I'm sure. So, but trust and verify, trust but verify, right? So let's see our output. We've got this final article draft here. Let's do this final article, and that's always screws me up when I go to Control Shift R was it? Nope. Control Shift R B. There we go. All right, give me the most significant AI LLM advancements. It gives me a job ID, generated date, overview, purpose of article, and this type of stuff is shaped by these prompts in here. If that annoys you, you can just alter them. Um, Major advancement, OpenAI's ChatGPT 5.2 release. I'd say yeah, that's fair. Open source models they did release their 120B and 20B models. That's true. DeepSeek's R1 model and subsequent ones, that's huge. Different ways of training the models. Multi-model capability, that's previous in the last 3 months, but that's pretty good. Prices per token, DeepSeek V3 going down. Trends with model specialization shift towards smaller task-specific models. You betcha. I think that's big. Impact on industries, business enterprise use cases, ethical considerations. So it gives you kind of a short little article. It does give references and stuff too. It gives you revision notes for kind of what it supposedly did between the draft and this one. Really, the meat of it is, here. So, we got some stuff about ChatGPT. What it bricked on is it didn't really pick up about anything outside of Claude and stuff like, or advances with Claude and some of the other things. So it wasn't perfect, but probably pulling in more context and giving the article a little bit more brief space might help. So there you go. And again, this isn't a prompt engineering masterpiece class, so I will probably do that. But these prompts here kind of shape a lot of the way, a lot of what's going on. I think I do have some hard-coded limits on like how much stuff to pull back and such in here, which again, in a production environment, I'd probably make all that stuff configurable outside of the running code. But anyway, there you go. If you wanted to know how to do some LangGraph agents and wanted another tutorial, here you go. You've got Hello World, gives you the base, which I generally, for me, is a great learning tool. And then you've got a more advanced version of that, which actually does something that you can kind of track through. So yeah, knock yourself out. I'll be doing a lot of these because I have to. I have to learn, and I might as well share what I'm learning as I go. I've done a lot of LLM stuff in the past, but um, you know, using the agentic frameworks, a lot of the stuff I did manually, which now you don't have to do. You got all these nice agentic frameworks. And again, this is just a how-to type of thing. This particular workflow, you could probably set up with N8N or something like that. Nice graphic user interfaces where you add the prompts at each step and it gives you a little node. And but I think understanding the basics of a low level will help you go beyond what you can do with N8N, although N8N, you can sure do a heck of a lot of cool stuff with that. But we'll do videos on that. There's already people on YouTube that have excellent content on that. So I'd just be adding to the noise at this point. Another thing too is if you're bored on Friday nights, I have a live stream. You're welcome to join. It's called Enter the Call-In. It's Friday nights, 10 Pacific time. And we just shoot the crap. And usually AI comes up, but a lot of it could be personal junk. A lot of it could be societal or geopolitical stuff. This just makes me happy here. So you're welcome to come and pop in if so interested. Once again, that's Friday at 10 p.m. Pacific times. And I'll usually announce it in the post. And just the links to all this will be in the description. Thanks for having a watch. And let's see if I can stop this recording. Here we go.